There are moments when the world holds its breath, when the air itself becomes a witness, when silence stops being peace and becomes a threat. A door locks, or doesn't. Somewhere in the darkness, someone is already inside. By morning, 3 people will be dead. 1 will vanish without a trace, and a 14-year-old girl will open her front door to discover that monsters don't just hide under beds. Sometimes they walk through unlocked doors. Sometimes they smile at you in town. Sometimes they're never caught. This is the story of a family that came to the mountains to heal. This is the story of a town that chose silence over truth. This is the story of a crime so brutal, so intimate, so deliberate, that 4 decades later, no one has answered for it. Tonight, we enter Cabin 28. We walk through blood-soaked carpet. We follow the clues the sheriff ignored. We speak the names no one wanted to say out loud. Because some cases don't go cold. They burn, quiet and steady, waiting for someone brave enough to feel the heat. This is the Keddie Cabin murders, and it begins the way all nightmares do, with a mother, a cabin, and a door left open. Let me take you back. Not to the murder, not yet. First, still believed in fresh starts, and the 2 youngest, Ricky and Greg, 10 and 5, still played like the world was safe. They were a family held together by one woman's refusal to give up. But Keddie wasn't the sanctuary Sue thought it was. It was a town of 700 people. Everyone knew everyone. Everyone watched everyone. And in small towns, secrets don't stay buried. They just wait. The neighbors noticed Sue right away. A single mother, 5 kids, no man around. Some offered help, others just watched. There was Marty Smart, living in Cabin 26 with his wife Marilyn. A drifter, a drinker, a man with a temper that everyone pretended not to see. There was Bo Bowdy D, Marty's friend with a shadowy past and ties to Chicago. Quiet, unsettling, the kind of man who watched too long. And there were others, friends, neighbors, faces Sue smiled at in passing. One of them would walk through her door that night. April 11th, 1981, Saturday night. Sue made dinner. The kids watched TV. Sheila asked if she could sleep over at the neighbor's house, the Seabalts, just next door in Cabin 27. Sue said yes. John had his friend Dana Wingate over, a 17-year-old from town. Good kid. Quiet. Liked to play guitar. Tina, Ricky, and Greg were already in bed. John's friend Justin Smart, Marty's son, was also staying over. Around 10 p.m., Sue turned off the lights in the living room. The cabin settled into silence. Normal, peaceful, safe. But somewhere in that darkness, someone was already moving. No one heard them enter. No glass shattered. No lock was broken. They walked in as if they belonged there. What happened next lasted hours. Sue Sharp fought. John fought. Dana fought. They were bound with medical tape, beaten with a hammer, stabbed with knives. The walls were sprayed with blood, furniture overturned, the phone ripped from the wall. And through it all, Ricky, Greg, and Justin slept in the next room. Sheila was next door. Tina was nowhere to be found. When the sun rose over Keddie on April 12, 1981, the town of Keddie woke up to a nightmare. And Cabin 28 would never be silent again. Sheila had spent the night giggling with friends, normal teenage stuff. She walked across the small stretch of dirt between Cabin 27 and Cabin 28. It was around 10 a.m. when she reached for the door handle. She had no idea. The first thing she saw was the living room. Furniture knocked over, blood on the walls, and lying on the floor, her mother. Sue Sharp was on her side, bound with tape, her hands tied behind her back. Next to her, John, 15 years old, his face beaten beyond recognition. And near the couch, Dana Wingate, 17, still wearing his jacket. Sheila ran. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just ran. Back to Cabin 27, pounding on the door. Someone's in my house. Someone is dead. The Seabolts called the police. Within minutes, Plumas County Sheriff's deputies arrived. They stepped inside cabin 28 and immediately knew this was unlike anything they had ever seen. 3 bodies, brutally murdered. No forced entry. No obvious murder weapon at the scene. But here's what made it worse. The Plumas County Sheriff's Office had never handled a homicide like this. They were overwhelmed. Evidence was mishandled. The cabin wasn't properly secured. Neighbors walked in and out. Contamination everywhere. And within 48 hours, the investigation started to crumble. Detectives interviewed dozens of people. Marty Smart, the neighbor in cabin 26, said he heard nothing. His friend Bo Bowdy D, same story. But neighbors remembered something strange. Late that night, they'd heard sounds, voices, coming from the direction of cabin 28. And some thought they recognized one of those voices. When police searched Marty's cabin, they found suspicious items, but nothing that definitively linked him to the crime scene. Marty's wife Marilyn seemed nervous.
Her story didn't quite add up. Days turned into weeks. The town of Keddie went silent. People stopped talking, stopped answering questions, stopped looking investigators in the eye. Because in small towns, loyalty runs deeper than justice. And someone in Keddie knew something. 3 years later, April 1984, a bottle collector was searching the woods near Feather Falls, about 62 miles from cabin 28. There, half buried in the dirt, he found something. A small skull, scattered bones, personal items. Tina Sharp. She'd been dead the whole time. But the discovery raised more questions than answers. Tina's body was nowhere near cabin 28. Someone had driven her there, dumped her, and whoever did it knew those woods. Part 3. The Suspects and the Conspiracy. Here's what they don't tell you about small-town murders. It's not that they can't be solved, it's that sometimes no one wants them solved. April 1981. The bodies were barely cold, and already the investigation was falling apart. Detectives had leads, they had suspects, they had names. But in Keddie, names meant everything. Primary suspect, Marty Smart. Marty lived 2 doors down in cabin 26, a veteran, a drifter, a drinker, the kind of man who smiled in daylight and seethed in the dark. His wife Marilyn was tired of his drinking, tired of his rage, tired of pretending everything was fine. And Marty had noticed Sue. Neighbors said Marty would watch her, offer to help with things around the cabin, show up uninvited. Sue was polite, but she kept her distance, and that distance bothered him. The night of the murders, Marty told police he was home all night, watching TV with his wife and their friend John Bo Boubidet. But later, Marilyn's account would be different. Bo Boubidet was trouble, Chicago connections, a shadowy past, organized crime ties. He was living with Marty and Marilyn, rent-free, around 50 years old, and he made people uncomfortable. The way he stared, the way he lingered, the way he'd show up when he wasn't wanted. And on the night of April 11th, Bo claimed he was home, watching TV with Marty. Funny how their alibis matched perfectly. Investigators found suspicious items in Marty's possession, but the evidence handling was questionable. And the lead investigator, Sheriff Doug Thomas, had once lived in cabin 28 himself before the Sharps moved in. He knew Marty. He had connections. In Keddie, everyone knew everyone, and sometimes that's the problem. The investigation stalled. Key evidence went untested. Suspects were questioned, then released. Detectives on the case grew frustrated. They had leads, they had theories, but every time they tried to move forward, roadblocks. Years later, investigators found something that had been overlooked. A letter, written by Marty Smart to his estranged wife. In it, a confession that was impossible to ignore. I've paid the price of your love, and now I've bought it with 4 people's lives. 4 people's lives. Sue, John, Tina, Dana. 4. But it gets worse. A counselor came forward years later. She had treated Marilyn Smart after the murders, and Marilyn had told her something shocking. Marty confessed, told Marilyn what he'd done, said he was responsible for Sue and Tina. And about the boys, he said, I didn't have anything to do with them. When investigators tried to use this information, it was dismissed as hearsay, not admissible, not actionable. The confession buried. And then, in 2016, something extraordinary happened. A hammer was discovered in a pond near Keddie. It matched the description from the crime scene. It was sent for testing. The DNA results pointed to Martin Smart. Evidence of his involvement, physical, undeniable. But by then, Martin Smart had died in 2000. Bo Bubade had died in 1988. Both men gone, never arrested, never charged. Justice delayed, forever. Today, Cabin 28 is gone, torn down in 2004. The land where it stood is empty. But the survivors carry it with them every day. Sheila Sharp tried to move on, but the nightmares never stopped. The image of that morning seared into her memory. Ricky and Greg grew up wondering, why were we spared? What did we miss? And the town of Keddie never spoke of it again. The Keddie Cabin murders remain officially unsolved, but the evidence tells a story of two men who walked into a cabin, who destroyed a family, who thought they'd never be caught, and a system that failed. Some cases are cold because the trail goes dark, but some cases are cold because someone wanted them that way. This has been Red Case File. Remember their names: Sue Sharp, John Sharp, Tina Sharp, and Dana Wingate. They came to the mountains for peace. They deserve safety. They deserve justice. And they never got it. Some doors should never be opened, but some stories must be told.